Trad Cat Night special guest podcast right here on the tradcatnight.org website, folks. Today is July the 2020. Hope you all are having a very wonderful, blessed day. As always, we continue to keep the podcasting moving along here Monday through Saturday. Typically 3 to 4 guests on a regular basis, folks. I must apologize right off of the bat. Several of my guests have been a no-show yesterday. And, all I can do is put it down on the paper. It's really up to my guests to be ready to go. And I've had to reschedule some of these in times past. We've got Steve Benoon from Israeli News Live. I'm working out a reschedule. I'm actually hoping to get that done tomorrow. Safe Haven Mike will probably be some point later this month. Ibn Thranholm, I never even heard from, so I hope she's okay. Just never heard back from her at all. She's a Danish journalist, Catholic journalist. So we're just going to keep plugging along. I can only schedule, and we'll just take it from there. Now, who we have for this podcast today is going to be Gerard Okelman. We've got a lot to talk about before I hand it over to him, though, for opening comments here, folks. We've got to get through our sponsors here. Get over to jacksberry.com, which is a Catholic website and service dedicated to the teaching of virtues of evangelization with a strong devotion to the Immaculate and Sacred Heart. There's many saint quotes, prayers, and articles posted throughout the week to help you keep locked in on the straight and narrow in a severe crisis, church and world at large. Please visit us request prayer intention section. Thank you so much to John Dean for all that you are doing. Also, olrl.org, which is a prolific traditional Catholic outlet, is a treasure trove of information. The main page updates monthly with important readings for us on our spiritual journey. There's a newsletter, which you can become a subscriber to. You can receive regular email updates. They've got an online store, which you can purchase from. So please visit olrl.org. Also, Mike Barry's Social Reign of Christ the King.com, dedicated to the education and promotion of the solution for the Masonic insanity, which is enveloping the world. And that's Mike Barry, longtime follower of Tradcat Night, joining the crew, the sponsorship crew this month. Also, don't forget to pick up your Darkness kit. They are on back order, though. I must preliminary warn you about that. I know some people who've ordered a month or two ago still haven't gotten them. We're still trying to get product from Isabel over in Brittany, France, which is, it's tough sledding what's happening over there in France. So please, hang in there, be patient. Kathleen's doing the very best that she could do. But in any case, it's a kit to help you stay spiritually safe during these turbulent times. Prayers, sacramentals, herbs, all sacramentals are traditionally blessed by Father Void. Everything is sold at cost. We're not profiting. And last but not least, jacksdave.com. It's dedicated to the support of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, social kingship of Christ. There's daily video, podcasts, weekly articles, music, prayers, and so much more. jacksdave.com. Without any further ado, we now want to hand it over to Gerard, who's going to be breaking down several different topics. I've got a few other topics written down here that if we have time, we will get into. But just wanted to throw this out there to you all. This is breaking news. Supreme Court rules that Trump must turn over tax records to New York prosecutors. So perhaps some more propaganda to light the fire under, light the fire between the fuel. Between the conservatives and liberals in this country. I'm sure they'll use whatever they come up with there to try to get Trump out. In any case, Gerard, where would you like to begin? And thank you so much for joining the program. Gerard, as you know, he's been joining us now for, it seems like a half a year now. He's a Catholic journalist, Paris correspondent to the American Herald Tribune. He's got his own website. We'll allow him to share that as well. Take it away, buddy.
Great to be back, Eric. Yes. Well, one of the things there's probably a lot of topics I'd like to discuss. I don't know if we have enough time, but one of the things that struck me yesterday, I'm back in Ireland now and visiting, and managed to get over here using a boat because the flight system is kind of still, I don't want to put on a mask basically, so I'm kind of trying to hold out as long as possible.
Yeah, I hear you.
If I could swim across, I'd probably even try at this stage. So I've been back in Ireland, and I've been observing the sort of situation here, and I went to Mass yesterday, and in my local church, and it was St. Killian's Day, and so I wanted to just say a few things, sort of a few thoughts I had about that, because St. Killian was a monk dating around 640 AD. He was known as the apostle to Franconia at the time because he evangelized much of Franconia, which was part of Germany and France, essentially most of Central Western Europe. He is associated with Würzburg, the city of Würzburg in Germany, and he set off from Ireland. At the time, Ireland had a school. It was called the School of Ross, and that was known as the Magnum Studium Scholarium in Europe. It was one of the great centers of learning, and he brought that learning to Germany and evangelized Würzburg, which was the center, one of the central cities in Franconia. And he went to Rome first of all, and was commissioned by Pope Conan to evangelize Franconia in a period when Rome was in considerable conflict with Byzantium. And of course, you've always had this tension in the church between the spiritual and the temporal realm. And Rome was trying to assert its authority, but at the time, Justinian II in Byzantium, the emperor of Constantinople, was trying to assert the unity of the empire, the unity of the Eastern Empire, and was also trying to sort out all of the heresies that were pretty much all over the place. You had monothelitism, the idea of Christ having one will, monophysitism, the idea of one nature in Christ, and so on. And these heresies were causing a lot of trouble. And this was a period when Rome was also looking towards Franconia, which would eventually become France to a certain extent under Charlemagne and the Holy Roman Empire. And Rome was kind of trying to reassert its authority. And Ireland played a very important role in doing that, because St. Killian did evangelize Würzburg. That led to the evangelization of Germany. He taught agriculture, which from agriculture, Germany became a great industrial power, because the Irish had mastered the art of agriculture long before anyone else at the time, because they had access to a lot of the texts coming from the East. And so it was sort of interesting just to ponder the significance of that when I looked on the internet later and saw that in Germany now, they are experimenting with all kinds of liturgical anarchy. I saw something which doesn't shock me, but is very much representative of what's going on in the church. It was something like a mass, pretending to be a mass, where the altar was in the middle of the church. Everybody was sitting around it, and there was a clown performing some kind of a circus during the mass. And this was sort of the new mass, where you had a clown, and the priests were sitting down, laughing at the clown, sitting up at the altar, and pretending to be the Pope, and putting on vestments and taking them off, and this was not a joke. This was not not Monty Python. This is actually
what they're
an
doing.
Actual church in Germany, and this is the kind of stuff they're doing in the church now. Nobody seems to know what the purpose of it was, other than just a clown basically saying mass with like full vestments of a clown. And it just sort of, it was kind of, I guess, for me, symbolic to see that in St. Killian's Day. I don't know if that happened. I think it happened recently, but I didn't. Just thinking yesterday of, Germany and where it's going in terms of European civilization. I think this is very, very symbolic of where the church is right now, and particularly since the COVID-19 crisis, because what it has really done is it's turned the world into a clown world. And so, it's a bit like a Samuel Beckett play, where a lot of the characters focus on measurements. Like, the measurements are completely meaningless, but everything is measured, and there's a sort of Beckett sort of tries to show the absurdity of the sort of measure in a meaningless world. And in a way, the COVID-19 crisis is all about that. It's all about new rules that have no sense, no meaning. There's no logos. Yet there, you have to stand here, stand there, and so it's turned the world into a clown world, and that is a direct consequence of the apostasy in Rome, and of the takeover of the church by these anti-Christian forces. So that was one of the things that struck me, sort of looking at the latest episode in Germany. Of course, as you know, the Germans, you probably have things to say about that. The Germans have been very vocal in their support of the complete takeover by liberalism in the church.
Hmm. Yeah, they're the worst. Yeah, they're definitely the worst. Now, what did you make of the Vigano letter? Vigano stepped up and basically have been saying what we have been saying as hardline traditionalists for quite some time. Archbishop Lefebvre, Freemasonry has taken over. It's now a war between the children of light and darkness. You had Trump even coming out and supporting Vigano on that level. But do you see more and more people waking up and they're like, man, this Vatican II has to go?
Absolutely. I mean, I wanted to come to that because, again, just sort of thinking about the crises in the church in its history, there are all kinds of similarities. I mean, there was always this tension between a ruler who wanted to restore order and who wanted, in a sense, to restore the basis of civilization, a secular ruler, and the corruption in the church, and also the problem of the authority of the church. And what we've, again, if we were to come back to my example of St. Killian in Germany and the crisis in the church at the time, you had the crisis with the church basically trying to assert its authority over the Byzantine Empire. But at that time, you had Justinian II, who was following Justinian I, basically trying to rein in the elites. He was very unpopular among the aristocracy, popular among the peasantry, was very much pushing Rome to sort out the problems of heresy in the church, because he understood that the empire could never be united if it did not have Logos. And, you had the popes in Rome, the pope that sent Killian to Franconia. He only lived a year, but his successor Sergius was deposed by Justinian II. The point here being that Justinian II was kind of, in a sense, it reminds me of Trump. He was basically trying to get Rome to come back, and was, to resolve the problem of heresy and corruption. And Trump's support for Vigano is, again, this another example of the sort of the secular authority stepping in where the ecclesiastical authority is no longer there, and sort of saying, look, we've got to support, the right men in the church to restore the authority of Rome, because ultimately all authority in the world comes from Rome, and that hasn't changed. That's the one constant in history. And this is what we're seeing right now with Trump's endorsement of Vigano and that letter. It's quite, I mean, it's historical, and it's an extraordinary event. Really shows as well the fact that Vigano is talking about Freemasonry. He's not holding back in that letter. It's quite thorough. And not only that, but as we've seen in recent weeks, Vigano is now going after Vatican II. He's no longer he's not defending Vatican II. He really is very much coming into the traditional point of view, and so that is again, you see this tension throughout history between the secular and temporal order. And what has happened is that the spiritual and temporal order, I should say, and what we've seen in the last 100 years is the temporal order simply taking over. And the consequences are the chaos that we're in. So Trump's endorsement of Vigano is highly significant.
Yeah, no. And speaking about tension here, I wanted to get a few minutes of this in here in regards to censorship. We had E. Michael Jones recently, YouTube channel pulled down. Stefan Molo, John X Army, who's a frequent guest of mine, his popular YouTube channel's got like 250,000 subscribers, if not more, went down. He's only like able to use Patreon now. Censorship, going ahead, Gerard. This is going to be tough because, as you know, you retweeted some of this information, which I retweeted from your page. There's a further attack upon quote unquote conspiracy theorists. There's all kinds of attacks upon the faith. We now got, what is it, Newsom coming out saying we shouldn't even be like singing or praying in church. Don't even open your mouth in church because people might get infected. There's literally attacks. There's literally decapitations of church statues. We got Black Lives Matter nut jobs running around. I watched another video on Gloria TV of just some peaceful people praying the rosary, and there was this crazy demonic black dude running around blowing horns in everyone's ears saying, I'm going to rip the cross off of you and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, you come in my neck of the woods. That ain't going to end peacefully. I know that.
Sure.
But the bottom line is it's getting nutty out there, Gerard. Talk to us about what you're seeing.
Similarly, in France, I mean, Alain Soral, who is the founder of Égalité et Réconciliation, which is the biggest political website in France, and he's probably the most well-known dissident intellectual in France. His YouTube channel has been shut down. So this is a worldwide phenomenon. I think that they obviously are going to shut everything down. I mean, this is where this is going, and the consequence for YouTube will be that I guess people will stop using it. Other platforms do exist. I think Trump's attempt to go after big tech is very important. I really do hope that AJ Barr delivers on this in terms of legislation and the possibility of suing. Because again, that's a major step in the right direction in the United States. I mean, you have in the United States, at the very least, a very clear conflict now between the forces of Logos and the forces of chaos. In Europe, we are under the reign of chaos, and it's a sinking ship. And I've said that before. We don't have a government that is defending civil liberties really anywhere in Europe. Even the conservatives in Europe, I would have less faith in Orban of Hungary or the Polish to a certain extent than I would in America. I really see America as being kind of the final frontier now in the battle against the New World Order. So the censorship has run amok, and again, it comes back to this whole what happens when you declare when you deify bourgeois liberty, which is essentially what happened in the West when they with the whole idea of abstract liberty. What you get in the end is a prison planet. Essentially, you will not be able to do anything, and that's what we're seeing. It's just a society of meaningless, stupid rules, and you end up in an absolute tyranny. And so people are paying the price for the absence of real, genuine authority in the world. And
now, I was going to say, do you see this? I mean, here in the West, from your perspective across the seas, there, do you see all this sort of destabilization? The left versus right, conservatives versus liberals, north versus south, black versus whites. Do you see this as a bigger, on the bigger picture, destabilization for a UN takeover, maybe a foreign takeover? It's in Catholic prophecy, of course. We're waiting for Russia to attack the United States. We're waiting for Russia to overrun Europe. I know you wanted to mention here Russia tying it in with Turkey here in a minute, so maybe that's a good segue.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, if you look at just what's happening in Turkey right now, there's the recent conflict there between Russia and Turkey over Hagia Sophia Church, which of course is a major landmark in Christendom. And the President Erdogan wants to turn it into a mosque exclusively, and so that has created tensions with Russia. And of course, it's creating tension. It is not creating so much tensions with the EU because they don't give a damn about Christianity, but it certainly is a problem for Russia. Russia sees itself, of course, as kind of a third Rome. So Russia sort of is linked to Rome. I was only listening to a podcast by a Spanish theologian last week, again talking about Putin asking Pope Francis about Fatima, and Pope Francis refusing to talk about it. I don't know if it's true or not, but it has been reported that conversation took place via intermediaries, and that Vladimir Putin is very interested and aware of Russia's role in history and the third secret of Fatima and the consecration of Russia to the Sacred Heart of Mary. Or the Immaculate Heart, I should say. So Yes, I mean, to come back to the division, the divide and rule that you just mentioned. I mean, here, if you come back to Hagia Sophia, or Hagia Sophia, as some people pronounce it, here there's a definite attempt by Erdogan to reestablish Ottoman supremacy in the world, or at least in the region. And I've written extensively over the years about Turkey's resurgence as a great regional power. Turkey is, the power now in the Middle East. It's very much um, on its own. It tends to have problems with many of its neighbors. It's, you could look at the war in Syria as a Turkish Syrian war. I mean, Trump said that he did not want to get involved in a Turkish Syrian war, and again, that was unusual for a U.S. president to be so anti-war, even though he's still very much bogged down in Syria. But to come back to this idea of divide and conquer, what's happening
Hmm.
here, I think, is that the Islamic and Christian tension is
Hmm.
being stoked
Escalated,
by
yeah.
this move by Erdogan. And of course, Russia and Turkey, even though they're collaborating on many issues, they're huge, both major powers. Um, they're very much in conflict over a lot of issues. And this issue, of course, is creating conflict with Russia again. And so Turkey is very much a problem for many countries now. The aim of Erdogan is to form a new caliphate and to unite the entire Muslim world under
Hmm.
a sort of neo-Ottoman rule,
Yes.
and to form a global empire out of that. And Turkey's it has a lot of power, it has a lot of economic power, and so now it's another sort of variable in this equation, this geopolitical equation, because Turkey is in conflict with the United States. Turkey's got a geopolitical alliance with Venezuela. It's also an alliance with Iran, but it nonetheless is at war with Iran in Syria. And so you have a situation as well here geopolitically that you have countries who are allies on the one hand and enemies on the other. And it just seems that instead of coherent nation states fighting each other, you simply have ruling class factions fighting each other, and that the kind of foreign policy consequences of that are
Mm.
chaotic.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jesus warned in these times that a nation would rise against nation. There would be wars and rumors of wars, but he also said kingdom would rise against kingdom. So basically, belief systems, if you will be clashing, no doubt about it. This is why I've always said this doesn't, not that we want violence, but this doesn't end peacefully, folks. Now, my next question for you, Gerard, is in relation to COVID Part 2, and I know you got some other information you want to present, but what's the latest happening in your neck of the woods? We've already seen some states relocking down, Texas, Florida, West Virginia required to wear masks outside. I think it's New Jersey now. I think down in Miami Beach, you're fined $100. Like if you're not wearing a mask, it seems like this is the new norm. I personally won't wear a mask. I walked into a West Virginia Walmart the other day, and they were demanding that I wear one. I just walked right back out.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in over your neck of the woods?
Well, here in Ireland, the general approach to all things global is to be as globalist as possible, and we haven't let anybody down in the coronavirus scenario. We are very much a very high lockdown country, and it's still not opened up. The bars and have yet to open, and other, there's quite a lot of restrictions. Um, and in Europe in general, that's the case. I think that one of the things they're saying here in Ireland a lot is that if we continue to be, sort of A1 students in lockdown, then we'll kill the virus and it'll never come back. But of course, at the same time, we are hearing reports every day of new outbreaks and so on and so forth. And of course, we're all being prepared for the second wave, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know what the second wave means. It just means that they'll lock us up again, and then the second lockup will be much more draconian, because of course they will have failed, and they'll have to be much more draconian, perhaps enter people's houses and
Yes.
get sort of military style teams driving around the place, and then quarantines, and maybe we'll need quarantine facilities, so they'll have to sort of take people away and put them in there for a while. And I mean, this is kind of where this is going, obviously. And I think people here, in my view, is that the way, there are two types of people now in the world. There are people who are skeptical about what's going on, and people who aren't. People who aren't will basically continue to live under this tyranny, but will regret it, I think, when the next wave comes, which I suspect will be September or October. The next wave of repression, because I think it could be really, really draconian and really scary. I would definitely prepare. I think it's, prepping.
Yeah.
This is the time for prepping, because, there will be a global economic collapse. And when that happens, you will have food shortages. I mean, it's inevitable. And it's not just critics saying that. The World Health Organization is saying it. So they're admitting that there will be famines of biblical proportions, they're saying. So I think we should take them seriously when they say that. So I do think that the second wave will be obviously, I don't really believe in a wave of this thing called COVID-19 as such, but there will be a wave of hysteria, and that will cause I think unbelievable chaos and destruction. And I think this very much, the election in the United States is, of course, a big issue this year. It's like if Trump gets in, then things could, really positive things could happen, and we could turn the tide. If he doesn't, I think we're going into a period of civilization breakdown. I mean, we're already there, and of course, to stop that election, they will try anything. So this is where it may not even be coronavirus. It could be coronavirus plus a major war. The possibility of a major war is still there. A false flag attack in the Middle East or in Iran, or any could provoke global conflict.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next. If you could give us an update as to what's been transpiring with between Iran and Israel. I think most of us in the Christian circles have been long awaiting some major false flag, which will be blamed on Iran. Then Israel will have the right, to go and create an even bigger, greater Israel. They want to obviously create that third temple so the Antichrist can rule from there. What's the latest happening between Iran?
Well, the latest problem in Iran has been an explosion in Natanz nuclear facility in Iran, and that it's unsure about what exactly happened, but obviously I did an analysis for a media company there recently on this, and I'll be sharing that on social media probably next week when it's out, which is a kind of an analysis of the covert war in Iran waged by Israeli U.S. intelligence, which started with the Stuxnet internet virus a few years ago, and and also, of course, the assassinations of scientists there, and the recent attack in the Natanz facility. The Iranians, the conflict, of course, between Iran and Israel is always there, and I think that. The crisis of this year of 2020, the dramatic event, was the assassination of General Soleimani, who is a major hero in Iran. I mean, I've been to Iran must have been there now about 10 times. I traveled all over the country. Know a lot of people there. Met many of the leaders in the country, and Iran is a country that really wants peace, and in many respects. It's sort of been the punching bag of the Trump administration. But we're seeing there as well that even though Trump comes out with this sort of ridiculous anti-Iranian rhetoric, nonetheless he opposed people like Bolton. Bolton would have nuked Iran. Bolton would have turned Iran into Iraq. He would have completely leveled it. So it's very difficult to read Trump's policy on Iran. I think that what he really wants long term is a negotiation and some kind of a settlement. I do think that Iran is, for Trump, I think his real problem with the JCPOA agreement on the nuclear issue was the money that was given by the Obama regime to Iran, and I think that's part of the corruption dossier that they're bringing out on Obama and a whole of other issues, and that's something that is, of course, there's problems with Russia there as well, but I think that's kind of part of the strategy against Iran, is to bring down the elites who did the deal. But I think that, interestingly about Iran, from talking to imams there, it kind of surprised me in one of the last conferences I attended in the city of Mashhad, very religious city in Iran, where imams were talking about the return of Jesus Christ. And of course, they see Jesus Christ as, returning with the Mahdi. It's sort of their view of it, but nonetheless, it was kind of interesting. There were, traditional priests, traditional Catholic priests, invited to some of these conferences to dialogue, in a real dialogue between Muslims and Christians on this issue. And it was interesting to hear imams talking about the return of Jesus Christ. So I was sort of reminded about, it sort of reminded me of the Magi. The Magi were said to be Persians, and sort of, I was sort of wondering, could Iran have that role in history as sort of a country that would, particularly to the Muslim world, talk about Jesus Christ and talk about and sort of be maybe a catalyst for the evangelization of the Muslim world. I don't believe that's what they want to do. They absolutely don't. But nonetheless, history, history doesn't always work out the way you intended. And in the end of the day, one of the things that's bringing Christians and Muslims together on these issues is that we shouldn't be fighting each other, and we shouldn't be used, as pawns against each other. And that, of course, applies to everything. Everything else. We see the race wars now being stoked up, and I think that what's going to happen with all of this Black Lives Matter, and which of course is a Soros-funded operation to promote homosexuality in the black family, always was and always will be, and has nothing to do with racism. I think the purpose of these things obviously is divide and conquer. We're seeing it all over the place now. But one of the things that is happening, and I've heard many of these stories, is that people who really may not know that much about what we're talking about are beginning to see what we're talking about. And, that people need to sort of see it first. And once they kind of see it, then they kind of realize, look, there's something wrong here. There's something not right about all this. There must be something behind this. And I think that, in a way, maybe they kind of have to see Rome fall before they realize what's going on,
Yeah, that's how it typically is. Unfortunately, we've seen that all throughout history. Gerard, unfortunately, we're just about out of time here. We always like to give our guests some shameless self-promotion time. So what do we need to promote this month? And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, GOC News, Gearoid, GOC News, GEAROID, GOC News. Get on there, support me. I'm a Lone Ranger, serve the public, don't serve any special interests. Please support me and encourage me and help me to keep going in these tough times when we're all being banished from public platforms.
Yeah, no, that's it. Let's get out there and support them. And folks, we've already got them locked up for next month. Thank you all for tuning in to Trad Cat Night special guest exclusive podcast for this July the 9th, 2020. Until next time, stay safe and God bless.